And welcome back to What's Growing On. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm your co-host, Dorothy Dorton with AARP Alabama. And as always, I want to welcome back our true expert, my co-host, Terrence with Victory Teaching Farm here in Mobile. Terrence, we had a great episode last week. There were so many great questions. I think we're going to get started right off the bat with answering those. But first of all, how are you doing today? Everything good?
Yeah, I'm great. Just enjoying this little bit of fall weather that we've got going on down here. And yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It is so nice. Okay, so our first question was from Pam. And Pam asked, what are some safe material for raised beds or containers for someone on a budget?
Okay, so when we say safe, just when I talk about that, I talk about non-treated lumber. Now you can get non-treated lumber that's not expensive, but it's not going to last. It's going to eventually, after several years, it's going to eventually rot. The other option for that is not necessarily an inexpensive option, but to get some type of hardwood like cedar or cypress. That's a little bit more expensive, but it will last forever for the most part. And it's untreated. There also are a lot of materials that you can buy from, your garden center or big box stores that are environmentally friendly type pre-made raised beds. But for the most part, trying to find something that's super inexpensive. I mean, you can use bricks to make kind of a raised bed if you have access to, extra bricks somewhere in your yard, or you can even purchase those. And then a lot of people use cinder blocks to build their raised beds. And of course, there's always a question with everything. There's always someone that's going to say, this may leach, this may do this. But if you're really going for environmentally friendly and completely, lacking of chemicals, then cypress or cedar, one of those types of hardwoods, is going to be your best bet.
Okay. Great. That's wonderful. And what about like containers, just good old maybe terracotta pots? Or
terracotta pots are a good one as well. One thing with terracotta pots you have to make sure is that the terracotta soaks up moisture, and so you have to water a little bit more, but that's not a big issue. But just something to think of with the terracotta. But yes, definitely, that's a good point, Dorothy. I didn't think about mentioning terracotta pots.
Yeah. So that's usually my go-to because they are cheap. And so, until now that we've really gotten into this, I've never really invested too much into a garden because I don't have that green thumb. So, but yeah, all right, great. And that's some great information. So here's our next question. This was from Tamra, and she asked about suggestions for the best veggies to grow in her DIY tabletop greenhouse in Huntsville.
Okay, so really, honestly, it just depends on how big when she says tabletop, I'm not quite sure how big that is. But things that won't really need a lot of space, or your lettuces, spinach, things like that. If it's deep enough, she could grow radishes and things like that. But just depending on the size, I mean, really, honestly, any of your winter veggies, if it's big enough, you can grow those, especially up in the north part of the state. So any of our winter veggies would work. Just depending on the size.
Okay. Those are some great questions and great answers. Thank you so much. And I am going to pop Terrence's email back up here real quick so you can see. There it is down below. And just remember, you are welcome to ask questions in the comments. Those questions that we got actually were from the comments last week. So please ask questions in the comments as we go along, and also email Terrence your questions, and we will try to address them at the top of the show if we don't address them at the end of the show. Thanks again, Terrence. Let's see, now we are going to be talking about a happy garden is a healthy garden. And so this is all about, we've gotten our garden established and we need to keep it healthy. So, and we had some really good questions about what to put on your plants or in your soil from last week. So that led perfectly into our episode this week. So let's start talking about the basics. Taryn, can you talk a little bit about just what a basic healthy garden needs?
Okay. Yeah, sure. And do we have a slide for that, Dorothy? Okay. Yeah. Just want to make sure. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So obviously plenty of sunshine. 8 to 10 plus hours a day of sunshine, preferably morning sun, is a definite. Adequate water or irrigation. And then most importantly for healthy, happy plants, you need nutrient-rich soil that has all of those things that your plants need to thrive.
Awesome. Awesome. So the next natural question, I think, is, we know we have sun and water. What do we need to know about keeping our soil healthy?
So you want to check your soil for those needed nutrients, and you can get a simple soil test kit at your local garden centers. And they're very easy and simple, very user-friendly to use, and it will tell you exactly where you're lacking or where you have an abundance. But your plants are going to tell you that too. So if you don't test your soil beforehand, or you already got your plants in the ground, they're going to tell you when they're not getting all the nutrients they need. They're going to brown or yellow leaves. They're not going to grow like you would think that they need to. They'll have stunted growth, and they'll either have poor flowering or fruiting. So they may not provide, fruits and veggies like you would want them to if they don't have everything in the soil that they need.
All right, great information. And yeah, just look at your plants and they'll tell you. So
they will tell you.
That's a great suggestion or great information. So we're talking about, let's say we go out, we look at our plants, they don't look too great. So we know our soil probably needs a little boost. So what are some of the nutrients that we need to give it, Taryn?
So there are some primary nutrients. These are the typical things that every plant needs. And these are also the ones that typically will be deficient. All good. Okay, good. So nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and calcium. Those are the primary soil nutrients that you need to grow pretty much about anything. And those are the first things to become depleted because your plants are pulling those from the soil. So it's very important once you've harvested and you're moving into a next phase of gardening that you test your soil or replenish those nutrients back into the soil, because your previous crop would have soaked as much as that up as it needed or as it could.
All right. That's great. And we do have a question real quick that kind of goes into this. Are there any, Ann Hales asked, are there any particular nutrients to pay attention to in this part of the country? Like, is there anything that Alabama soil may be particularly lacking that you know of?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm not aware per se of what Alabama soils lack or have an abundance of. That's a great question. The 4 that were listed are basically the typical nutrients that you're going to need. And so just making sure that your soil has enough of that. And like I said, those soil test kits, they're very user friendly and they will show you. And a good rule of thumb is kind of right in the middle. It'll show you if it's high or if it's low, but it'll show you a range that's kind of a good, perfect, right in the middle range for what you need to grow your fruits and veggies.
Perfect.
And your herbs.
Perfect. And I know going back to last week's show, you had mentioned that some plants take more nutrients out of the soil than others do. So it's always good to kind of rotate the varieties of plants that you do too. Is that right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Specifically nitrogen. That's something that every plant uses. So that's typical of where when you see that your plants aren't doing well, so many times it's because there's a lack of nitrogen in the soil.
Right. Okay, great. So nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and calcium, a lot of these are the same things that we as humans need. So we can take vitamins and get what we need, or eat the right things, maybe like our veggies from the garden, to get the nutrients we need. So if our soil and our plants need these nutrients, what can we do to get these nutrients in our soil?
Well, so you can always go to your local garden centers, which Anne had asked where you buy these test kits. They're at your standard garden center. But you can also go to your garden centers and you can buy, and there's a section that's organic. You can buy a fertilizer that has everything in it. If you're looking for a less expensive way to do that, compost, compost, compost. So, and this was something that was asked in one of our last episodes: are coffee grounds good, or eggshells, banana peels, those kinds of things, tea bags and any other leaves, and any fresh fruit or veggie scraps. And just building kind of a compost bin. You can put these things directly in your garden. You can put them in the planting hole before you plant your plants. And then it'll kind of be a slowish release type fertilizer. But all of these components or items that you can compost are things that contain nitrogen, potassium, calcium, and phosphorus. And then one rule of thumb, though, if you're going to compost, no dairy, no meat, and no cooked fruit or veggie scraps.
Okay, that's good. So no dairy, no meat, and no cooked veggie scraps. Okay, that's really good to know. And I've actually seen like some YouTube videos and stuff where people will actually, and this is something that I would never be able to do, but have an eggshell where they actually put soil and seeds in the eggshell to make it, and then just plant the whole thing, which is kind of cool. So, and so we're talking about compost, and then here's some things. Tell us about these things that we can use, or what we need to do for a compost container if we don't put it directly in our garden.
So you can use any container. I actually saw something this morning, just a standard garbage can, where they kind of poked holes in it so it would kind of get oxygen, and they just would come out the back door and dump the scraps in there. One of the things about compost, and it's kind of, everybody always worries that compost is going to stink and attract bugs and flies and things like that. And to a minimum, of course, you're going to have, curious insects and things when they smell it. But for the most part, if you're not putting dairy and meat and things like that, when it breaks down, it's just more of an earthy smell. There's really not a stink to compost necessarily. And you just got to keep it turned, keep adequate sunshine. If you are using a container, or if you just have a little pile in the back corner of your yard, make sure that you keep it covered to keep out pests and things like that, especially if you have, if you live in an area where you may have raccoons or things like that, or even just, puppy dogs or cats in the backyard. But use something clear or translucent, and that'll actually kind of help keep some of the heat in too, because it needs to heat up to break down.
Okay, that's great. That's so good to know. So, and like you said, it doesn't really smell that bad because you're not supposed to, all the stuff that does stink, you're not supposed to put in it anyway. So that's very good to know. And yeah, just like a clear plastic tarp or something. Again, you can get that at your garden center as well.
And there is something else that, I'm sorry, Dorothy, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead. No, please do.
I wanted to say it before I forgot. You can buy, and actually I got one of these for Christmas one year. You can buy a countertop composter. And the one I received was a real pretty white ceramic. It had a filter inside the lid. And so after we'd chop our veggies, or, after the kids ate a banana or something, we just throw that directly into this composter. And the filter in it keeps it from having any kind of smell in your kitchen. Coffee grounds, eggshells, and it will just kind of self-compost right there. And you can take that little composter straight out to the garden and dump it and work it in your soil around your plants.
Oh,
that's another easy way if you don't have a lot of space outside for a bin or, a bucket or a pile.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I also like you mentioned, I like the idea of that trash can because it's kind of more cylindrical and doesn't take up too much space. So that's really great. All right. So one of the things that you mentioned that I'm excited to talk about is, and as I just finished my peppermint tea, is making your plants some compost tea. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty easy method. You just need a container of water. You want to let it sit for maybe about 24 to 48 hours. That way the chlorine and that kind of stuff that's already in our water will kind of break down and be out of there, because you don't want to put that dirt. I mean, you can put it on your plants, but it's best to, if you're making the compost tea, it can impact some of the nutrients that are in your composted materials. So then you just add those composted materials to your water, and that's your fruit and veggie scraps, your eggshells, your coffee grounds. Let it sit a couple of days, and then you can just pour it directly onto your plants and directly at the roots. And then, like you said, it's a tea for your plants, a healthy tea.
Awesome. So it's almost like making, what is it, sun tea, where people would brew it in the big jars, outside. So, but it's just for your plants. So that's great. And that's so easy to do too. And it doesn't cost anything. So
no, and you actually, I love to make sun tea. That's my favorite thing to do. Just set that big glass jar out, outside, and it tastes so much better than just standard brewed tea. But you could actually use the sun tea type jars to do that with. So
Right. Excellent. Just make sure if you're going to make sun tea, you clean it out real well before you do that. So
I have one for my tea and one for my plants tea.
I think that's a great idea. A great idea. So that's such great information to know. And I just find it fascinating about the compost tea. It's such a great idea. So finally, we know that a happy garden is one that is free of pests. And as we know, down here in the South, we have our fair share of pests. So, do you have any suggestions for natural or organic pesticides that we can use? And before you answer, I want to remind everybody, ask your questions in the comments. We'd love to hear them. We'd love to answer them at the end of the show. So please type in any questions you have about any gardening questions you have. Please let us know. So let's talk about the natural or organic pesticides we can use now. What are some of those ideas, Tarrant?
Okay, so basically, you can always, again, go to your local garden center, and they have an organic section, and they will have organic pesticides if you don't want to use any of the homemade type things, or if you feel like those aren't working as well. Neem oil is something else that's been used for centuries and centuries. That's a very good pest deterrent, and you can get that. It's easy to find at your garden centers. Soapy water, just your standard dish soap, your Palmolive or any of that. Just a mixture of soap and water in a spray bottle will deter pests. Pepper spray, like cayenne pepper, you can make a spray out of that and spray. You can even shake it around the bottom of your plants, and that's something that will deter pests. Garlic is another one. Just because of the strong smell, you can actually plant either garlic in your garden around it, or you can take little cloves and just shove them down in the dirt near your plants. And then herbs and flowers. So herbs, just like the pepper and the garlic, herbs like rosemary and things like that have a really strong scent, and that deters a lot of your pests. And then flowers. Which I know winter, we're not as much able to grow flowers like marigolds and things like that. But, those attract, especially during the spring, any kind of butterfly type flower or marigolds. Those things attract beneficial insects and pollinators. But those beneficial insects not only help pollinate, but they a lot of times are predators for those pests that are eating up our plants. So kind of a win-win. You get pretty flowers, you get herbs, they deter, and they, invite in those beautiful pollinators that we love to see flying around our gardens.
Awesome. That's great. Great information. So one question is that I saw is, what are are there any specific proportions for the soapy water? Like when you're putting it maybe in a spray bottle, is there any specific proportion? What's too much soap versus what's not enough soap? Maybe does it matter really, or?
I mean, it is going to matter because you don't want to, you would not do half water, half soap. That would be too soapy. Honestly, I just kind of a couple of little squirts down in the bottom of the spray bottle and then fill it up with water is enough to do what you need to do. But yeah, a very minimal amount of soap compared to water. So if you think, just like when you're washing your hands, a couple of squirts and that's plenty. If you put 10 squirts of soap on your hand, you've got way too much. So kind of the same thought process with, making that spray.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And then going back real quick to the pepper spray, because my mind started wandering and I was like, pepper spray is in like the self-protecting pepper spray, but you said it's the cayenne pepper mixed in a little water. Just hot pepper? That's
what we've used, cayenne pepper, and just mixed with it. And I've actually just sprinkled it around the base of my plants as well. So you can do that, or you can make a spray to spray on your plants. And spraying the soapy water on your plants and spraying the pepper spray on your plants is not going to hurt them. And it's not going to change the taste or anything like that because we're going to wash our produce before we eat it anyway. So, you can spray it directly on the fruit, directly on the leaves, and no harm.
That's awesome. What great information. Thank you so much, Taryn. And I just want to remind everybody that I will be posting these slides in the comment section on Facebook after the broadcast ends. But we want to hear from you. So I'm going to pop Taryn's email up there. And again, as always, you can ask your questions in the comments. And you can email Taryn, and we will answer them either like at the end of the show if they're in the comments, or we will answer them at the top of the show if you email them. But we would really love to hear from you and love to hear what your gardening questions are. And like last week, for example, Pam and Tamara did such a great job with their questions that we're actually going to be working on a whole episode on answering their questions about accessible container gardens on a budget. So we're going to really deep dive into that. So if you have something like that you really are interested in, or if you have some, nice tips or something like that, email us, put them in the comments. We'll see, what works for you to control pests. Share your ideas. We'd love to hear it. We're really on the angle of, natural and organic with this, and obviously on a budget, like the compost that doesn't cost anything and the compost tea. I just think those are great, brilliant ideas. So please don't forget, we want to hear from you. We want to interact with you. We'd love to hear your ideas. So for our next episode, we are going to be talking about indoor gardening, which is really exciting because, sometimes if there's people in apartments maybe, or, it gets really cold outside sometimes in Alabama. So you want to bring bring your gardening inside. So we're going to be talking about that on November 30th. And Tara will actually be co-hosting with my colleague Ann Hales to talk about that. I will be out on vacation with my family. So we're really excited about that. I'm still going to be listening in because I really want to find out about the indoor gardening. I think that's kind of more my speed. So Tara, again, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And now here's a quick question.
I was going to say we have a question.
We do. We sure do. A last minute one. Great. From Minetta. This is a great one too. Tips on how to protect your plants from frost.
Good morning, Minetta. Thank you. That's a great question because even down here on the coast, we do have the times of the year that, we have our little frost that come through. So a lot of our winter vegetables, specifically greens and kale and things like that, they like a little bit of a frost. It gives them a sweeter, less bitter taste. But those deep freezes, when we have what the weather guys call a hard freeze, that's when you really want to take the precautions to protect your plants. And so depending on if they're in containers, you can bring them inside. Honestly, here at my house, we don't have anything fancy that we use. We get just a sheet just a standard bed sheet, and we will cover our veggies and even our outdoor plants that are in the ground that may, burn from a frost or a freeze. You can use like burlap, and you can get that at your local garden centers. I think you can even get it at some of the big box stores. It's easy to find. You can buy specific frost cover type materials from your garden centers to utilize. And then I remember one time at the teaching farm, and we're in a pretty large space, and so it's a lot to have to cover. Unfortunately, we don't get that many hard freezes down here. We have lost some veggies before because of a hard freeze, but it was hard to cover most everything. I remember we had a late season frost, and we already had put tomato plants in the ground, and so we actually have a lot of big containers, like planting containers, and we just put them right over the top of the plants. Anything to block the wind and just to kind of insulate a little bit. Another good thing to make sure that you do is mulch around your plants. And even if the leaves burn a little bit, it's not damaging the base and the roots of the plant. So if you mulch a lot with leaves or straw or things like that, that'll help hold the heat in. One thing to remember though, do not use plastic. Because plastic will hold in the moisture, and then that's gonna actually freeze your plants, and damage the plants, if not kill them.
Okay, that's great. And I was going to say, because I think we touched on this in one episode too, and you were saying do not use the plastic, which I did not know until you said that. So that's really good. And Minetta had another great question to kind of go along with this one, and it was what temperatures should we consider covering them? At what point should we consider covering them to protect them?
So the average, I believe it's about 25 degrees. And you're looking at more so like we get these early frost. I know here in South Alabama, we get these early frost and they're fine. They're not a deep hard freeze. Mm-hmm. It's those temperatures below around 25 to 27 degrees that last for multiple hours. So you might just, the temps might drop. You just got to pay attention to the meteorologist. The temps might drop to about 25 overnight for an hour or two, but they're going to tell you this is a hard freeze. We're going to be below 27, 28 degrees for 5 to 6 hours. That's when you need to really take notice and protect your plants. It's that hard freeze. A light frost typically is not going to hurt your winter vegetables.
All right, that's great. So pay attention to the weatherman, and if he says hard freeze, then cover them up.
And they'll typically say protect your plants, your pipes, and your pets. That's that standard. They tell you when it's going to be a hard freeze, your plants, your pipes, and your pets. If you hear those words, then you know that you need to get out there and cover your plants or bring them in. That's a great way to say it. That's perfect. So, all right, Minetta, great question. Yes,
especially
thank you,
since
Minetta.
We're coming up on cooler temperatures that hopefully will stick around a little bit. But yeah, great questions, Terrence. As always, great answers. Again, folks, please feel free to send us your questions in the comments. I'm popping Terrence's email back up there, so you can send it to her later. And again, don't forget, I will put all of these slides into the comments on the Facebook broadcast of this. So you can go back and look at those and get some great ideas. And I also put up answers to Minetta's questions because they were so good. I wanted to make sure that we documented those. So you can go back and reference those. So again, thanks everyone. Hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you, Terrence, too. And hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we will be back on November 30th. Terrence and my colleague Ann will be back. And we will see you then. So have a great one, guys. Good luck with all of your plants. And happy Thanksgiving.